Once I had my son, by the time he was about 8 or 9 months, I was feeling like I was an adult because I was a mother. So I then again started to defy my parents and their rules. And my mom, she suggested if you feel like you can just really live your own life, then you can, move on and go ahead and live your life. Otherwise, you got to live by our rules. And I chose to move on, and I left the house with my child.
Hi, this is Shelomo Solson, the host of the Teenage Impact Podcast, where I share stories, tips, and specific strategies on how you as a teenager can overcome struggles in your life. Whether you're going through anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts, I have interviewed over 70 people from around the world on their struggles, how they were able to overcome them, and how you can too. September 15th is coming out very soon, in less than a week. And that is when my book, Never Fight Alone, is coming out in hardcover, paperback, and ebook. It's a compilation of 51 inspiring interviews on how you can overcome your struggle in your life and improve your mental health. I really want to open this conversation about mental health and about what people are going through. In this book, there are all types of stories. People who were sexually abused at the age of 6. People who was arrested, sentenced to 14 years in prison, and now an inspirational speaker, has spoken in over 600 countries. People who were self-harming, on the verge of suicide. So many different types of stories. And it says in this book, which I want you to read because it's a life-changing book. Click the link in the description to learn more. Today's podcast guest is Ms Yogi. Ms Yogi is currently a licensed master's social worker. She's also the founder of a hip-hop based organization that helps youth overcome struggles in life called Teens Under Construction. She didn't have a very easy path. In middle school and high school, she got in trouble a lot. She got into a lot of fights. She got expelled from school at the age of 15 and 17. She got pregnant. She was homeless. She dropped out of school. And eventually, she found her way. Today's podcast episode, we're going to talk about Ms Yogi's story, how she was able to manage being homeless and being a teen parent at the same time. So give it up for Ms Yogi. Hey, Ms Yogi.
Hi, how are you today?
I'm fantastic. Tuning in from the Bronx, correct?
I'm originally from the Bronx, but I'm based out of Westchester now.
Okay, perfect. Now, growing up, how was it growing up in South Bronx?
It was an interesting experience. I always tell people there's an interesting experience in the Bronx as far as when you grow up in the Bronx as a child, you enjoy, just being able to run free and you don't really look at, poverty and at, the crime that's going around as an issue because you really adapt to those things. So I tell people it was bittersweet. We had a lot of fun, but we dealt with some challenges nonetheless.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. When we were talking, you were going through some struggles in middle and high school. What were some of those struggles?
So I always tell people, school was never an option. It was always an obligation, as for most people, right? But I think that for some people, sometimes school's a little bit more enjoyable than others.
Mm-hmm.
I personally know that for me, I have a little test anxiety, so I know my learning skills might be my learning styles might be a little different than others, and even attention span. Sometimes if I get bored, I drift off very easily. Not in an ADHD manner, but more like in a disinteresting manner. I just if it doesn't call my attention, I don't care to give it my attention. So going, in school was interesting. I did it, like I said, I didn't love school, but growing up in the South Bronx and coming from a broken home and so on, there was some anger issues that we dealt with. And therefore I was a fighter. I was a handful in school. I beat a couple people up. I got expelled a couple times. I got sent through the district a little bit, changed schools, been put in different environments. But as a social worker now, I realized that it didn't matter whether they changed me, we weren't addressing the problem.
Yeah, but what was the true problem that you found out later on in life?
I find that there's a lack of support, specifically in our urban communities. I think that we teach a certain structure of what school's supposed to look like, but again, we don't all learn the same. So in understanding that, right, I didn't know that I learned different. So they might have been days where I felt like I wasn't as smart as everybody else, right? Not because I felt like, I couldn't learn it. I felt like it took me longer to learn it than the kid that sat next to me, right? And then you have the really smart kid in class, and it was just like, shit, everybody's finishing and here I am with this assignment. So it was just easier to shut down and just kind of be the tough kid than to feel like you were the dumb kid, right? So I think that played a part on that as well.
So it's an interesting point. You didn't want to seem like the dumb kid, so you took it out by picking on other people?
Well, I wouldn't say I was never a bully. I never
Okay.
classified myself as a bully, but I was always very assertive. If you did something to me or said something about me that I didn't like, I was definitely going to confront you, and there were definitely going to be consequences. I, I I wasn't a bully, but I wasn't. I also wasn't the kid that you were going to bully because my assertive character would just not allow somebody to treat me indifferent for whatever reason.
And what excuses would you make back then
So
for
see, that
getting in
was the thing
trouble?
about me. I never made excuses. If I
Mhm.
if I if I did something physical to you, it was I was very honest. You said something I didn't like, and therefore I could have used my words to tell you that, but I feel like you would understand better if I was physical towards you instead. So I was
Mhm.
always very honest. It was never necessarily an excuse. It was like, I'm mad, so I punched you in your face.
Mhm. But what would you tell adults when you would get in trouble, when you would get expelled, when you would get into fights?
I would tell them just that. If I don't like you, I'm gonna punch you in your face, whether they were adults or kids. I can I can take it through incidents, right? Again, in being I was always very straightforward, and I think that my assertiveness has always been a good point and a bad. It has been a good skill and a bad skill, right? A teacher was saying that I was talking during class, and I really wasn't. I remember this day like it was yesterday. I was in fourth grade. This is when I was expelled from school. He called my mother in. He insisted that this particular day I was talking. And I was the kind of kid that if I was talking and you said, "Are you talking?" and I would say, "Yeah," and I'm not done, so I'm going to finish talking. And I didn't care whether I got in trouble or not. But he insisted that I was talking at one point when I wasn't. And that to me was very bothersome because that to me talked about my character. You're saying I did something that I didn't do. And that bothered me because I already had a character. You already assumed certain things about me. So it was like, let's all make it like, let's make it real. Don't lie on me. And I attacked this teacher because he kept lying on me, right? So when
Mhm.
it was like, so why did you attack this person? It was like, because he lied on me. And as a kid, I felt powerless, and I knew that if I physically attacked him, he would pay attention. You all pay attention to me.
Mhm. Did your parents try to discipline you?
They did. I went to juvenile detention. My mom was always very stern. People are amazed when they meet my mom because she's a very assertive and stern individual. But I was just a hard-headed kid that wanted it my way.
Mhm. Now let's go into when you were in high school, when you were 15 years old. You mentioned that you became pregnant at 15 years old.
Hmm.
What was your reaction when it happened and when you found out?
My reaction was holy shit. And my reaction, it was more fear than anything. It was fear in telling my parents. It was fear in how my older siblings would react, right? So there was more fear than anything else with that news.
Hmm. What did your parents do, or how did they react?
Well, my parents were upset naturally. I was 15 years old.
Hmm.
So they were definitely very upset. I would say, disappointed to a certain extent, but nevertheless supportive.
Hmm. And what happened afterwards, after you had the child?
Once I had my son, by the time he was about 8 or 9 months, I was feeling like I was an adult because I was a mother. So I then again started to defy my parents and their rules. And my mom, she suggested if you feel like you can just really live your own life, then you can, move on and go ahead and live your life. Otherwise, you got to live by our rules. And I chose to move on and I left the house with my child.
Hmm. Is that when you also dropped out of high school and became homeless at the same time?
I dropped out of high school after the first week I attended. I hated school. I
Uh-huh.
hated the space. I hated having to listen to adults. I hated people telling me what to do. So I just stopped going to school.
Hmm. And then where did you go after you ran away from home or left home?
When I left home, my friend and I lived together. We stayed with a couple friends here and there, and eventually her and I ended up living out of an abandoned building that was abandoned, but it was livable.
Wow.
So we stayed there for about a year. She had her child and I had mine, and then eventually, we put our money together and we found somewhere to live.
How were you able to get through those difficult times? Because there's a lot of teen mothers, teen fathers, and some of them become homeless. How did you eventually manage during those rough times?
I always tell people one thing about me is I'm a very resilient individual.
Uh-huh.
I don't sit and just cry and complain about what's going on. I actively work on improving stuff. So my mindset was literally that, just getting up every day to assure that I had a plan to move forward. And eventually that plan was able to come together. I was able to move forward.
Mhm. What would you say is an actionable step for someone who's going through the same situation you did?
Well, I think those vary, right? Because, right, for me, in my mindset, being from the Bronx, I knew that the way to get money was by selling drugs. So if that's what it took for a little while, we did that, right?
Mhm.
I knew that by, doing certain things, I can obtain, certain things. It was just a matter of, it was more of a survival skill stuff, right? It was more of like what I knew, what I learned from the streets and surviving that. And when I was arrested at the age of 17 for a drug charge, and that's when I knew that, with a child and, with a drug charge, that just really didn't go together, right? I couldn't parent my child if I were to have received jail time. That was at the same time that I received the news that I was expecting my second child, which that reaction was mind blowing because I felt like I couldn't have another child at that time. I was still
Mhm.
young. I was still trying to figure things out. But I went ahead and had my daughter. And then eventually my friend and I were able to save up enough money and we got our first apartment. And, it was just a matter about it was my mindset. It was really, me keeping a positive outlook regardless of what the current situation is.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. And then you went ahead and got your GED afterwards, right?
When I was 19 years old, yes, I got my GED.
What was that turning point? What pushed you towards that direction?
My arrest. I knew that
Uh-huh.
that no longer was an option. That wasn't a valuable option, right?
Mhm.
As a 17-year-old, I was still tried as an adult, but I still had the right to be tried as an adolescent. So I knew that, at that point, I didn't really have the ability to jeopardize my livelihood because I had children to take care of. And at
Mhm.
that point, I just knew that I had to find a different way. And a start to doing that was obtaining my GED.
Mhm. Did they take away your children at that point, or you still had them?
Well, my son was taken from me for about a week. He was put in my mother's custody while I fought my court case. And then, CPS came and they kind of, investigated and, there was no charges filed against me. And, I was able to put that behind me.
Mhm.
I knew we don't always get second chances.
Uh-huh. It's sometimes luck is what we need, right?
I believe that people that work hard enough
Yeah.
could be lucky. I don't necessarily believe in luck itself.
Yes. The more persistent, resilient you are, and the
Yes.
more you put yourself out there, the luckier you get. I mean, law of attraction.
Right. Agree. 100%.
After your GED, did you go to college right away? And what did you study?
After I took my GED, I started college and my first major was computer science. I don't know why, because I don't like science and I don't like math and I don't hate technology, but
Mhm.
I'm not that great at it. But I majored in computer science for a little bit. I enjoyed the college experience, but I didn't enjoy the major, so I ended up dropping out. And then I went back to school and majored in criminal justice. And then I learned some things that didn't necessarily attract me as much anymore. So I went through a couple of fields. I tried like maybe taking some teaching classes. I thought about being a teacher. And one day I sat with a professor who ran the social work department. And we talked for a little while. She asked me a little bit about myself, and I shared. I'm very open about my life. I don't feel like there's anything to hide. And she said to me, she suggested that I be a social worker, that I can help a lot of people. And I thought that she was crazy because based on my characteristics and who I was. I didn't feel like I was fit to be a clinician, for that sake being. And I gave it a shot, and here I am today. I'm a clinician.
And what do you do now?
I am a clinician. I work at a local high school. I
Okay.
provide. I'm a social worker at a local high school. I run a violence prevention program, in addition to being the CEO and founder of my own non-for-profit organization.
Hmm. And what does teens under construction do?
So Teens Under Construction reaches out to what we identify as disconnected youth, and disconnected youth are pretty much youth that had experiences like myself. They're disinterested from school. They're disinterested, well, can't get a job, right? Because if you're at 15, 16 years old, you can't really be employed. There's a lot of pieces that go with that. So we try to really hone in and attract those youth and really talk to them and encourage them to find their strength and to
Hmm.
locate their resiliency and find out what they like and how they could be successful and what success means to them, right? Because I think that success is different to us. For some people, success is becoming a millionaire, while for some other people, for me, I consider myself successful, right? I was able to come from a dark place and be in a better place and provide my children better. So to me, that's in sense success. I'm not rich
Hmm.
by far, but I enjoy what I do. I'm able to eat every day. I have a good, home over my, a good roof over my head. So we really go out into urban communities and really try to reach out to those disconnected youth and really try to engage them and help them be proud of themselves.
I love it because my whole brand, Teenage Impact, is about resiliency. It's not about what happens to you; it's how you bounce back to
Right.
what happens to you. And you're the perfect example of being dealt certain cards in your life. You having your own troubled times during your teenage years, but you didn't make an excuse that, hey, these were the cards that dealt with me, and you just left it alone. No, you took charge. You went back to get a degree. You went back to get an education. Now you're impacting other people's lives and helping them create their own success story. So I give you props.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Uh, how can someone be more resilient?
Well, I think that to be more resilient, we need to understand ourselves a little bit more. I drive in really teaching young people to get to know themselves. My team consists of I do programming at the local jail and at local residential centers, and my team is a team of three: myself, a young lady, and a gentleman, and we are all very different. He's older. We joke with him that he doesn't know technology or he doesn't know music as much as we do, right? But the purpose of all us being so different is being able to know yourself and find a comfort that it's okay with you being different than somebody else, right? Understanding that your confidence is going to attract the right people towards you. If you're not confident, then I'm not going to be confident in you neither. So it's really learning, tapping into, what people are going through and helping them understand that they are not what happened to them, but how they react, as you said,
Mhm.
and really helping them learn how to react to situations, right? Because growing up, I only knew how to react to situations violently, right? I don't like you, you make me mad, I hit you. Solve my problems. As a person who runs a violence prevention program, I stay away from telling people that violence doesn't work because that's not true. We go to war, right, with other countries because it
Uh-huh.
works, right? If we win, we on top and we look like so really preaching to young people that violence doesn't work and then they seeing differently in the world around us. It's really contradicting. So I stay away from telling them that, but I do encourage that there's a better way with better outcomes because violence might work initially, but the outcome of that is going to be forever
Uh-huh.
regardless in what setting.
How would you tell someone to approach a certain situation without violence?
Well, I think I will as a clinician, I will have to have assess that person and how they work, right? And have that discussion with them, right? What the situation is, what the outcomes would be. If you come at it this way, what do you think is going to be the response, right? I always tell people never to use the term you when you talk to people, you're addressing somebody about something that bothered you. Because if I come and say to you, well, you made me feel bad, your reaction is going to be, no, I didn't. What did I do? What did I say, right? It becomes more about you and less about me
Mhm.
instead of me saying, well, you made a statement that made me feel really bad. And, I would like for us to discuss it because I took it some way. So I want to make sure, whether that was right or not, right? So it changes the conversation opposed to me coming in and attacking you that you hurt my feelings, to me telling you my feelings were hurt based on a comment that you said and I want to discuss that. So I think that it's just how you approach certain situations and certain people.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've heard of the book by Dale Carnegie, Win Friends and Influence People.
I have not.
Okay, so it's a book. I mean, he passed away a long time ago, but that was one of his first book back in the early 1900s, early to mid 1900s, and it's popular, sold millions and millions of copies around the world, and it talks about this a concept of trying to influence people and getting a certain outcome on a certain way, and that's a lot of the things that you were saying is accessing different situations, like sitting down with them. If you attack someone head on, they're going to be defensive, right?
Right.
So a lot of times that doesn't work. So we have to actually talk to that person without offending them and try to get an outcome where both sides are the winners.
Exactly. Right. So timing is important. The
Yeah.
words you use are important, right?
Yeah.
Because I can't approach you if you're already upset, because regardless to how I approach you, you're already in the zone, right? So it's just, those are a lot of, you really got to assess when you're ready to take a situation on.
Mm-hmm. It's crazy because I remember I used to be bullied for a long time. Sometimes I was the smallest kid in class, so I would come home with bruises on my arm, and I would show my mom, and mom was like, "Why don't you punch them back?" But I was the smallest kid. Everyone was stronger than me. I didn't want to fight. I'm still not a fighter. I believe that's just not my personality. I'm the type of person that calmly sits down with the person and actually talks to them and getting the situation out there. So I'm glad you cleared that up. But is there any other advice you would give people who are in a rough situation, a rough time in their life?
I always explain to people that our brain is broken up into components, into logical and emotional. And sometimes it's important to really kind of balance that out and think about what's your logical moves and not so much emotion. I think we get caught up in, what people say or what people do, how people look at us, and that really gets in the way of us moving forward. So it's more about thinking, definitely with a level of emotion, because I don't want to recommend for people to be emotionless, but to really combine that with their logic thinking and, think strategically as they step forward.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And for people who are younger and having a kid, some people are different. Some people, accept having a kid, and some people think it's going to be the end of their life. What would you tell them at that moment?
Talk to people, find people, build yourself some kind of support group, reach out to other people, look for organizations that support young people. I think that's really important. We live in a world where adults are constantly saying stuff like, this generation is this and this generation is that, and it's important to be able to understand that all our generations went through stuff. This wouldn't be the first generation having kids at an early age. Our generations before us did too. So it's definitely doable, but it's important, first and foremost, to take care of yourself first and to identify what you're going through. Because if you don't take care of yourself, you'll never be able to take care of anybody else. Not your mom, not your unborn child, not your born children. So it's important to check in with yourself, make sure that you're doing okay before you start to spread yourself out to other people.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I believe that's the best way to take care of a child is to work on yourself
Yep,
and to set that example for your kids to be better.
absolutely.
I end all my podcast interviews with this one question, and you touched base a little bit on resiliency, but what does resiliency mean to you?
It's funny that you asked that. I That's a question I ask all my groups too.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, to me, resiliency in a layman's term means the ability to bounce back.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I tell everybody, right? Resilience is the ability to go through something, accept that you went through it. And when I say accept it, it doesn't mean that you're okay with it or that you condone it, but that you understand that that was just a chapter in your life, and that you can move on and start writing your next chapter without that being an influence.
Mm-hmm. I love it because that's exactly what I say in the speaking engagements. You don't have to enjoy everything about the process, but the best way to overcome something is accepting the situation you're in, accessing it, and then figuring out ways to overcome your certain struggle in your life. So
Absolutely.
great job, Ms Yogi. Where can people find you?
I am at Teens Under Construction on IG, on Facebook, and Twitter. Our email at the organization is info@tuc-inc.com. And if anybody has any questions or we could provide any services to anybody, we'll be more than happy to have a conversation with them.
Awesome. Go check her out. She's amazing, and she's doing a lot of great things. So thank you so much, Ms Yogi.
Thank you. You have an amazing, amazing day, and thank you for having me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to today's podcast episode of the Teenage Impact. If you haven't done so already, click the link in the description to learn more about my book, Never Fight Alone, which is less than a week away. If you're not following me on Instagram, I have a very personal side to me. I have life-changing short clips on what you can do to overcome some of the struggles in your life. So go ahead, follow me on Instagram at Shelomo Solson. So until next time, peace.